Great to meet you all. Today, I'm going to be speaking about what is now being kind of coined enterprise automation. And so I guess I'll start with a brief introduction of myself. So my name is Nick Mortensen. I am one of the principals here at Eide Bailly. Specifically, I run the business process automation team. And so we do a lot of things. We cover everything from traditional kind of low-level web development all the way up through, integrations, RPA, low-code app development, kind of everything in between. The idea being we got a whole bunch of tools that we can choose to help solve whatever business problem that you have. And so based out of Austin, Texas, but yeah. So first, a little kind of brief intro on Eide Bailly. So Eide Bailly is a 100-year-old accounting firm, for those of you who don't know, 105 actually. So we're founded in 1917, got offices in over 40 states. The fact that we're, 100 years old, I bring it up not just because it's a novelty. I actually think it does affect the way that we view the world. We've been around for a long time, and we value relationships. We value being here. And so I like to think that it positions us such that we're going to do what's best for you guys and our clients, because we're not going anywhere. We're not looking to sell. We've spent 100 years building our name. It's important to us. And so we're going to do our best to do right by you. But we're not just a CPA firm. Right, so kind of the dirty little secret out of Bailly is that we're really good with technology too, and just general business consulting. And so obviously I sit in the tech consulting side of this of the practice, and over here we've got over 230 consultants, over 400 certifications across our team. We got 90th percentile client satisfaction, and we do all sorts of fun stuff. But down on the bottom left corner of the screen here, you can see that we've got ERP, CRM, integration and automation, which is the space that I play in, cybersecurity, analytics, and just kind of general consulting, as some of the main offerings that we have here in tech consulting. So there's a 30-second overview of Eide Bailly and who we are. But we believe one of the things that I think differentiates us from a lot of the competition is we really do believe in a better way of doing business. We believe that, we want to work with you. We want to partner with you. We want to be an active participant in your business's growth. And we have built out a suite of services specifically around what we think is going to be most valuable for our clients. And we strive to be a trusted business advisor first. So we're not just looking to scoop up whatever project we can. We want to make sure that we're working with you and being collaborative to do the right thing. That's enough about us. What are we talking about today? So we're talking about automations, and specifically we're talking about how we can reduce IT spend through the leveraging of appropriate technologies. And so in order to sort of set the stage, I wanted to go over some research that we have gathered from Gartner and other sources on kind of the market, where we're at, the trends that we're seeing, and how that influences the way we should be viewing our businesses, our technology spend, et cetera. And then we're going to talk about, what investment in technologies, right? So the investment should be to add value, to become faster, to be more agile, to be more accurate, to make database decisions, right? Those are the things that we should be aiming to get out of the investments we make in order to drive the return up, and therefore in addition, right, part of that should be driving cost down. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so why we care, right? Let's talk a little bit about the market and lay the foundation for the rest of the conversation today. So when we worked with Gartner and did a bunch of research and kind of found out what are the main things that our customers right now are really concerned about or struggling with. And these are the four main things right now that you guys and like, business owners, this is what people are struggling with. Number one is the rising cost of doing business, right? Interest rates have gone up. It's just more expensive to conduct your business than it was. A huge part of that is the rising cost of human capital. So we can't find good people. When we do find good people, they're extremely expensive and they're hard to retain. That's a legitimate problem that businesses across the spectrum are facing. Number three is the pace of technology advancement, right? Things are moving so quickly. How do I keep up? How do I make sure I'm staying on top of it? And how do I make sure that I'm getting a return out of the investments I've made? That's very top of mind for everyone. And fourth is a term Gartner has coined called the total experience. Basically, it means, people are looking at the way they're investing a little differently. They're looking at, not just necessarily revenue generation for their technology investments, but also creating better experiences, because in order to attract and retain talent, attract and retain customers, right? That experience of working or doing business with me as a company needs to be better. And so anyways, those are the four main things, right? I can't find people, it's really expensive, technology is moving fast, and now I got to start thinking more about what the experience of working with me is like. So I thought this was a really interesting slide. And what you see here is a complete flip-flop in what is important to companies. So we can see in Q3 of 2021, revenue was far and away the thing that people were most concerned about. And in the matter of a single quarter, everything flip-flops, right? So all of a sudden, I'm not as concerned about revenue and growth and things like that. I'm like, holy crap, inflation this is a thing, right? Like this is really hitting my company hard. And I can't hold on to people. And I can't find people. And you look at the bottom three: lack of applicants, employee retention, employee well-being. I mean, in Q4, that's 34% of what is like 34% of like business owners' mind share is being consumed with just people, right? And so we see this complete flip-flop from, generating money to, man, this is expensive and I can't find people. I thought this was a very, very telling slide of kind of what small businesses are facing right now. So Gartner is an extremely valuable resource. One of the things that always makes me laugh, they do a really good job of attaching fancy buzzwords to very normal things. So they're now calling something the distributed enterprise. And let's be honest, it's just working from home, right? That's all it is. And so COVID changed the work environment. I'm here in our Fargo office in North Dakota. And this office, because it's our headquarters, is normally bustling. And, our offices are open, people are welcome to come back, but the people have spoken. And, there are just not a ton of people in the office. A lot of people come in, but they come in periodically, right? A day a week, 2 days a week, when they have a big meeting, when they need to collaborate. And so Gartner is calling this the distributed enterprise, where both staff and customers are spread out geographically. We no longer need to be, hiring does not need to be geolocated. And that brings with it a whole bunch of interesting challenges and a whole bunch of like technology spend and investment that wasn't necessarily required before, right? Because now in order to support a distributed workforce, you've got to have things digital. You can't walk down the hall and hand somebody a piece of paper anymore. And I thought this was interesting, but Gartner is saying that by 2023, 75% of the organizations that embrace kind of like this hybrid, distributed enterprise, so being able to, hire and work from anywhere in the world, really, they're going to realize revenue growth 25% faster than their competitors. And I just thought that was really interesting. And so, this is something that companies need to really start embracing and thinking about. And with that comes associated costs on spend, digital licensing and softwares and things of that nature. So next, total experience is another thing that's consuming a lot of mind share and budget right now at companies. So, Gartner is saying that by 2026, 60% of these large enterprises are going to be focusing on kind of transforming the way that employees interact and customers interact with the company. They want to have a world-class employer and a world-class, solution for their customers. And so they're just calling that holistic focus total experience. And they got, of course, they have a fancy chart to go with it, right? But it's thinking about the customer and the employee, what their experience is like working at the company. How do they get their job done? How do they interact with me as a business? And can they do it on their phone, on a tablet, on a computer, right? In an airport, wherever they may be, on vacation in the mountains. How do I interact with that company? That multi-experience, right, is becoming more important. And so obviously, as you can imagine, if this is what companies are focusing on, and this is what's consuming mind share, the spend that goes along with that is pretty significant. And lastly, hyperautomation, another funny buzzword. It just means that, it used to be integration or RPA or something like that. And now they're just saying, all of those things are necessary. We're just going to call it hyperautomation, with basically just using a series of tools to accomplish a holistic automation. So RPA is a tool, can't solve everything. Integration is a tool, can't solve everything. So combining those two, I get hyperautomation. But this is where it becomes interesting. By 2024, all of the automation that's necessary to support a total experience, to support a hybrid workforce, it's going to drive the total cost of ownership of all these technologies up by 40-fold, right? That's not 40%, that's 40-fold, a 40 times increase on what it's going to take to keep up with all the technology investments that are being made. That is significant, right? And as such, Gartner is saying that good governance is going to be a differentiating factor in how well companies perform. And so I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. But if you could have like one takeaway from today, it's that, right? If you want to keep up with what everybody else in your space and in your industry is doing, you're going to have a lot more to maintain and think about. You need to be on top of it, and you need to have a good governance strategy in place. That's at the crux of everything I want to talk about today. So I'm going to keep moving. Obviously, we don't invest in technology or automation for the sake of it, right? We're trying to get something. We're trying to get some sort of value out of the investments that we're making. And so what is that value? What are we trying to do by investing in automation? In a nutshell, we want to automate the mundane so that the people at our companies can spend their time focusing on what humans do best. Right? We want to solve hard problems. We want to add value. We want to, problem solve. That's where we get the most value out of our people, and that's where we get the best job satisfaction. So it's in everyone's best interest to have people do interesting work. And so how do we support that? How do we make it so that people aren't stuck doing boring, monotonous tasks? Automation is at the crux of a lot of that. It is very common, and I think this is why Gartner has coined this term hyperautomation. It's very common for companies to think that a technology will be the silver bullet that cures all of their process woes. And that's just not the case, right? And so I grew up a handyman. So in high school, I would I grew up in San Jose, California, and specifically in a town called Almaden. And there was an area of town that was very well to do. They kind of lived up on the hill by the country club, and they all had big properties and massive homes. And I was fortunate to kind of, by word of mouth, become the go-to handyman up in this area. And I think about, yeah, I did everything from fixing sprinklers to, splitting and stacking firewood and fixing driveways and stereo systems. And I did so much random stuff. If I got a call and was asked to go visit a property, normally what would happen is like, hey, so I've heard you guys can help me out. I've got a few random tasks for you. You think you could swing by and take a look at some of the things that I need done? And I would show up, and I would show up with a truck full of tools. It would be really silly as a handyman to show up and walk in with a tool, walk in with a wrench and say, all right, let's go solve that problem, right? You would never expect a handyman to do that. You would expect him to walk in with a bag full of tools, look at your problem, and then pull the right tools out of his bag to start addressing whatever the issue is. The tool that is needed is based on the problem that needs to be solved. And like, duh, Nick, like, of course, this is really simple stuff, and it is simple. For some reason, we haven't applied the same simplicity to the world of technology. And I don't know exactly why it is. My guess is it's because technology is kind of abstract. And so the lack sometimes of clarity on what a technology does leads to, a belief that it can do maybe more than it can. The point being, we have a whole bunch of different technologies around and available to us that do different things. And just like we have a whole bunch of different tools, there's gonna be a focus on what those technologies do and what they're built to accomplish. And so you can't just go buy RPA, for example, and I use RPA specifically because it was a heavily marketed technology. And for a very long time, RPA was looked at, and sometimes it still is looked at, as that silver bullet that'll just fix everything. And that's not the case at all. You gotta use different tools based on the problem that you're looking at. So I'd like for you to start thinking about the technologies that you see out there, more in the sense of like, okay, this is a tool. And by doing so, you can start picking the right tool for the job. This is another thing from Gartner. They broke out automation into 5 basic tools, right? There are 5 main things that are needed in order to accomplish process automation within an enterprise. You'll notice RPA is one of the 5 different tools that are required to holistically solve business problems. And so you've got RPA, you got built-in workflow, low-code, integration platforms, and IBPMS. IBPMS stands for Intelligent Business Process Management Suites. So think high-level business process orchestration, right? Anyways, every organization is going to have needs all across the board, right? Either multiple tools are going to be needed or compromises need to be made, and that's just the way it is, right? We can't go get everything under the sun. That obviously doesn't make sense, and a big part of what we're talking about is reducing IT spend. And so I bring this up because when you're thinking about reducing IT spend, a good rule of thumb is, what's the fewest number of tools or technologies that I need in order to accomplish the business problems at hand, and go with that. The trap that people fall into is they go out and they buy an RPA tool. Another company or another division maybe goes out and they need an integration platform, and then somebody else says, oh, well, I need a low-code tool, and they go out and you end up with 5, 6, 7 different tools when there are tools out there or technologies out there that maybe they can address multiple of these, or maybe you can set it up in such a way that you can accomplish multiple aspects of this with a single tool. Those are the types of things that you need to start thinking about. The consolidation of technologies is pretty important. So the way I view the world, and this is the world according to Nick, right? So don't, take this with a grain of salt, but there are kind of two main technologies that you can use to tie together a whole lot of stuff: integrations and RPA. So I think we've all heard before that data is kind of the lifeblood of your business. And it's true, data is really important. And there are tons of tools and technologies and companies that are built upon this. I mean, look at the tech giants in the world right now. You've got, when you think of like the monsters in tech, it's Amazon, it's Facebook, it's Google. What do all three of those companies have in common? Data, right? Like they all leverage data, and they leverage it very heavily to accomplish all sorts of stuff. Well, if data is the lifeblood of your business, integrations, and this is a little bit of a different view, integrations should be the heart. So the heart's job is to pump blood throughout my body so that the muscles and organs that require oxygen and nutrients, they get the oxygen and the nutrients they need when they need it in order to accomplish their function. Well, you start looking at your business, right? There's a whole bunch of different applications and different things that need to be done within your business. A good integration strategy, the job should be that heart to pump data all throughout your application ecosystem so that every different application and business function and business unit, different report, it has the data that it needs when it needs it. That's what an integration should be doing. And it's very common for people to think of it as like a rote connection. Oh, I just need to connect these two systems. And there's nothing wrong with that approach as a start. But when you want to start talking about driving down IT spend, it is very common for me to walk into companies that have 6, 7, 10, I've even seen as high as like 15 to 20 different tools that are all essentially doing this. It's tying information, it's integrating all these different systems. And it's because they looked at it from, I need to solve this task, right? I need to connect these two systems, or I need this marketing tool to connect to my CRM, or I just need, my trading partner to be able to communicate and get sales orders into my ERP, right? When you start looking at things as a one-off, right, you end up with, it's called application sprawl, right? Like or technology sprawl, you get all of these different solutions in place that are essentially accomplishing the same thing. Now, there's a really corny term I'm going to use. I know it's corny, but I still use it and I still like it because I think it's actually pretty effective. Economies of scale, right? So we know economies of scale, right? That's an economics term. As Walmart, right? Like I can buy stuff cheaper, and therefore I have the scale of Walmart allows me to operate more efficiently. I can get things cheaper, right? It's sort of the same thing when it comes to like a skill set internally. If I can consolidate and learn a single tool or have one or two core tools that my team uses, I can go deep. I can really understand that tool. I can learn how to leverage it to its maximum, and therefore I get a better return on the investment I made. I'm getting more done. I'm also able to reduce that total cost of ownership because I can address problems faster. It takes fewer people, fewer man hours to accomplish the same thing because, right, economies of scale. Anyways, this is something where this is probably one of the most common mistakes I see is trying to solve problems one-off instead of taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture and trying to understand, like, okay, holistically, how do I tie everything together? How do I make sure that all the different departments, the different applications, the different reports have the information that they need when they need it? So let's move on. Next is RPA. So when it comes to, automating business processes and tying things together, these modern integration platforms are really powerful and they do a lot. But there is a place where they start to break down, and that is the analog, right? Older systems, outdated technologies, manual processes. These things exist, right? Sometimes they're under control, sometimes they're not, but the point is they're always going to be there. And so when I have a business process that all of a sudden requires PDF or requires, a physical piece of paper, or requires interaction with a system that's installed on a physical computer that has no APIs because it was built, 20 years ago by some in-house IT resource, that's where the automation starts to break down. And that's where robotic process automation comes in and can save the day. And, it's an extremely powerful tool, RPA. That's a very powerful technology, but its scope is pretty narrow, right? RPA, all it's really meant to do is connect older applications and analog things to modern systems with APIs. As soon as I digitize whatever is not available, then it falls into my regular system, my regular processes, and you can leverage your regular integration platforms to continue with that brokering or that exchange of data. And this is really opens up a lot of doors. And so when COVID hit, right, and everybody was forced to work from home and everybody had to all of a sudden have everything be digital, we saw probably 2 or 3 years worth of digital transformation shoved down the throats of companies. They had to do this in like 2 months, right? And so RPA saw a massive boon in leverage and use, right? All of a sudden, it was like this magical tool, the gift that kept on giving, because it could do things like, take that piece of paper that I would normally walk down the hall and hand to somebody and they would look at it and physically type it into my system. Now I could take a picture of it, it would scan, automatically pull the information off so it's digital, shoot it off in a message in Teams or Slack or like something like that for it to be reviewed and approved. And once it's approved, it's automatically entered into the system, right? So it's like all of a sudden things like that allowed, a worker in Fargo, North Dakota to communicate in a streamlined way with somebody like myself based in Austin, Texas, right? That all of a sudden became instantaneous and very doable because of some of the technologies that RPA, some of the capabilities that RPA consists of and allowed us to do. I've got all sorts of really cool use cases on RPA. And so if you have additional questions, let me know, but I'm going to kind of keep rolling here. So traditionally, right, automation isn't new. Automation's been around forever. We've always been trying to automate things. But why leverage all these different tools now, right? So we have all these tools are doing what developers used to do, right? So we used to just have a bunch of developers that would build whatever the crap we wanted, right? And I still have some of those types of developers on my team. So why then do I need low code and an integration platform and RPA? Like, why don't I just have developers build out everything that I need? In a nutshell, it's slow, right? It's slow to have developers build those things. Think of it as trying to build a house or build something, right? Like picture Legos. I've got really, really tiny little Lego things. it takes a really long time for me to build a house. Now I have a ton of control, I have incredible detail, but it takes a really long time. Now, if you've been to like a children's museum or something like that, right? I have a bunch of little kids, so that's why this analogy is kind of pop into mind. I have those like giant, they have like those at the kids museum near my house, they have like a room filled with like giant Legos. These things are like bigger than my head. And I can build a wall with like 30 or 40 Lego pieces that my kids then go knock down. And I can build it really fast because I got these big chunks and I could, that's how you can kind of think of a lot of these tools. They allow us to have like pieces of functionality. So instead of having to write it out line by line and have it be very, like, they're allowing us to use these big building blocks and build things really, really quickly. And that agility that comes with that, the speed of being able to build quickly, that's incredibly important. So I played a lot of sports growing up, and I've always kind of, I love playing sports. I love being competitive, but my knees, I've had multiple surgeries. I'm at the point now where it's really hard for me to play, like competitive, basketball or football or soccer or whatever. Like my knees can't really handle that anymore. And so I was looking for another way, another sport that I could do that was maybe a little bit lower impact on my knees, where I could still channel that competitive, side of me. And I ended up looking at boxing, and I ended up joining a gym and I started boxing. I don't know why we do this, but I was convinced for whatever reason. Oh, yeah, I played football in high school and I'm going to be awesome at boxing, right? I just thought I was going to be great. And I joined that gym and I started sparring with people, and I was getting the crap kicked out of me. I was terrible. And it drove me absolutely bonkers because I felt like I should be good. But I mean, gosh, boxing is a sport, and like any other sport, there are fundamentals and skills that need to be developed, and there are principles in a sport that make you more effective. And boxing is not about power, right? And those stupid Rocky movies, right? I think they've got all of us thinking that, boxing is all about that big knockout punch. And the actual sport of boxing, it's not about knockout power, right? It's not about that big, huge KO. It's about speed and agility. It's, you look at my boxing gym, right? They had a big sign on the wall, and it wasn't like, go knock them out, or it wasn't, power is king. It was speed kills, right? That's what it said on the top of the boxing gym I went to. It was all about being fast, about being quick, about being balanced. Those were the fundamentals that made really, really good boxers. And speaking of really, really good boxers, the best of all time, right? Muhammad Ali. He was known not for incredible knockout power. He's known as one of the greatest of all time because he was fast. The dude was lightning fast, right? His whole mantra was float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, not hit like a sledgehammer, right? And this picture, I feel like, perfectly explains why balance and agility is so important. So in this picture, right, you have Muhammad Ali on the right. His opponent on the left has thrown a big, huge hook, right? That is, that's a big, huge knockout punch. And he missed, right? Muhammad Ali was able to move out of the way. And because he put so much behind that punch, trying to, get that big knockout, look at Muhammad Ali's opponent. He is completely exposed, right? The entire side of his head is open. The entire torso is available. And if you look at Muhammad Ali through quickness and speed and foot positioning and balance, look at where he's positioned. He has moved out of the way, he's perfectly balanced, and he is in the exact place that he wants to be to take advantage of the situation that's been presented to him, right? And now he's got choices and options of what to do next. So think of that kind of like as as a business. The need to adapt as a business is more important now than it has ever been, right? So if you look at the average lifespan of a company listed in the S&P 500 in 1920, the average age of a company was 67 years old. And the average company today has been around for 15 years. And you've got companies like Eide Bailly that are skewing it, right, where we've been around for 100. What is that telling us? Right? What can we take away from that? It's that change is happening faster now than it ever has before. And in order for you to survive, you've got to be able to change. You got to be able to adapt. You got to be innovative. You got to get better and evolve with the market. And you've got to do that faster now than ever before in history, right? And if you can't, your company goes under, your business dies, you sell, right? Like, you're out of the game. And so that ability to change and adapt and evolve, it's everything, right? And the importance of that is only getting bigger. So in the Muhammad Ali picture, right, the environment in which Muhammad Ali is competing changed, right? The opponent did something, the market, right? In this analogy, the market does something. Are you in a position to quickly adapt and take advantage of that circumstance? Or are you going to get caught flat-footed and have that change be the thing that takes you out, right? That's why we invest in these technologies that allow us to move quickly. And so when you're evaluating tools, how fast can I pick up this tool? How quickly will I be able to adopt it? How fast will I be able to train people on it? How much am I going to be able to build with this tool? Those are incredibly important questions to be asking, because the value that you get out of those tools is directly correlated with how fast can you move with it. That is the main value proposition of what you're paying for with these automation tools that are out there. Hopefully that makes sense. So low code, right? Developing via a graphical user interface. That has been the primary tool through which we've been able to build, companies have been able to provide more agility to companies than ever before. It's empowering the business user, business analysts and admins, empowering them to do what used to be the job of a developer, right? You think about the way the process used to be. I have a business need. I sit down, I write up the specs, right? I write up documentation and I submit it or I send it over to our IT department, where developers will look at my specs and they will take that request and they will fold it into their development sprint. So let's say this sprint's already full, right? So they're going to get to the next one, which is in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks later, they start developing, they build off of the documentation that I've provided, they deliver something, and sure enough, I go to test it and it's wrong, right? Like, their interpretation of my documentation was incorrect. And so I've got to tell them about changes, and then they fold the changes back into their sprint schedule, and like this cycle perpetuates, and it's infuriating. And most of you have probably experienced this in some form or fashion. Well, imagine being able to wipe that out and just have the business analyst say, hey, this is what we need to do. And then this low code interface allows me, I don't have to know semicolons and brackets and all that development language to get this done. I've got an editor where I can drag and drop and connect, and right, and all of a sudden, boom, the business person who understood exactly what needed to be done was able to build it. Right, that's where that speed and agility comes from. It's removing those types of business automations and processes and things like that, taking that out of the hands of IT and putting it back in the business. That's been the trend for several years. That's why Salesforce.com, in my opinion, really took off. Right, Salesforce.com is a behemoth in the software world. And they have been able to gain the traction they have been able to gain and do what they've been able to do because they were kind of the first to say, we need to make it easy for non-developers to build out this platform, to make it easy to configure, make it really flexible so that customers can be agile and quickly adapt to their business needs as the business changes and grows and evolves. So anyways, that low code interface is really important. So when you're evaluating tools, right, how well is that low code interface built out? How easy is it to use? How intuitive is it? That's a very, very big part of what you should be taking into account. All right, next is more accurate. Now, I am a nerd. I love this kind of stuff. This is out of a Frontiers in Neuroscience quote, but superior pattern processing is the essence of the evolved human brain, right? We are incredibly good at looking at ambiguous things, finding patterns, and drawing a conclusion from it, right? So a great example is somebody hands you a receipt. You can look at that receipt and very quickly figure out where the information you need on that receipt is. You can figure out the transaction day, you can figure out the amount, you can figure out the sales tax, right? Like, but when you think about the different types of receipts, like there are a million different ways that a receipt can be formatted. But the human brain is able to look at an image of a receipt and decipher it very, very quickly and figure out what is trying to be communicated and what exists where. You try and get a computer to do something like that, it's way harder because a computer, it doesn't have that ability to decipher ambiguity and figure out those like ambiguous patterns or patterns that you used to solve the problem of where is the sales tax on this receipt. I mean, that's what sets the human brain apart. And this is just kind of a fun little exercise, right? So our brains are programmed to be energy efficient. And the neocortex, right, the outer part of our brain, that's where that high order thinking comes. And you've got your limbic brain, which is kind of like the emotions, and then your brain stem is, you know, straight survival instincts. But the basic, right, the way you can think about it is that neocortex, right, that higher order thinking that allows us to solve those problems, it's an energy hog, right? It takes so much energy, and the inner parts of our brain are wildly efficient. They take very little energy. And so the way humans are programmed, we are super efficient with our processing power, right? And so as soon as we find a pattern, we offload it, right? Some of you may have done this exercise before. I'm going to do it real quick. Some of you may have not, and if you haven't, it's kind of a fun one to do. We're just going to do a basic math problem. Don't write it down, just do it in your head, okay? I want you to take 1,000 and add 40. Add another 1,000. Now add 30. Now add another 1,000. Then add 20. Then add another 1,000. And then add 10. Where are you at? 5,000. Or at least 90% of you are going to come to the conclusion of 5,000. The correct answer is actually 4,100. But what 90% of the human population does, now if you followed along, right? I know the first time I did this, I came to 5,000. We identified a pattern. Increments of 1,000, increasing by 1,000. And so the 40, then 30, then 20, then 10, right? We know that adds up to 100, but our brains detected this pattern of increasing by 1,000, and we just applied that pattern, right? I just think that I think it's fascinating, right? But what does that tell us? Nick, why are you talking about brains? Humans are terrible at manual rote tasks. That's the crux of it, right? Our brains are incredibly efficient, right? We're lazy. We start doing things like routine manual entry, and our brain has a very, very difficult time staying focused at a high level to make sure that we're not making mistakes. Our brain will get lulled into a pattern and it will shut down and you end up making mistakes, right? This is proven time and time again. It is a well-known fact that humans are the #1 source of bad data within a system. We put garbage in, and when you have garbage in your system, you're going to get garbage out. Your integrations are going to break, your reports are going to break, your process automations are going to break, right? Bad data is the quickest way to crap all over the investment that you have made in technology. And so what else are we trying to get out of making an investment in these technologies? We're trying to get more accurate data, right? So like we talked about, right, that data is the lifeblood. Well, if data is the lifeblood, I want to make sure that it's good, right? I want my blood to be good. I want it to be high quality. I don't want it to be filled with junk. It's the exact same thing with our data, right? And so the more accurate we can be at getting data into the system, everything downstream is affected in a good way, right? And so that's another really easy way to reduce the amount of spend, right? Is by leveraging technologies to make the input of data better. So what are some examples of this? Form controls, right? Don't let me put, you know, an incorrectly formatted email address into an email field, because then when I go to do some sort of, you know, automation that requires an accurately formed email address and it errors, right? Those are the types of things that consume the majority of, you know, like maintenance time for your technical staff, right? The total cost of ownership when you make an investment in a platform, right? It's 80%, it's the whole 80-20 rule, right? Getting that software stood up, doing the implementation, that's 20% of the cost and 20% of the lifespan. The remaining 80% is maintaining what's been built. And if you don't put stuff in well, right, and you allow for garbage to get in your system, that remaining 80% of the maintenance is going to be a nightmare, because you're constantly trying to clean crap out of the system instead of upfront making sure that that garbage doesn't get in. And so again, right, to kind of summarize that, we want to leverage technology in a way that allows data to be put in our systems more accurately. All right, so a couple of tips and tricks. #1, we're really talking about process. I think there is a little bit of a problem where the term integration is used in a different way now than it was way back in the day. You know, one of my first jobs was working at USAA doing integrations, and the integrations I was doing there was kind of the old way of thinking about integrations. I was moving massive amounts of data from one database to another, and I was putting it into a different format so that reports could be run. And, you know, like that's kind of the old school way of thinking about what an integration is. And I mean, there's still a need for that. But most of the time now, when I'm talking about integrating systems, I'm talking about a business process that touches multiple systems, right? A cross-platform business process. I'm trying to automate it. So a very common example is quote to cash, right? I sell something to a customer, and once it's sold, I need to bill them for it, right? That's one logical business process. Yeah, of course, right? Like, but I'm selling in usually a CRM, right? A customer relationship management system, and I'm billing out of an accounting system or an ERP. And so that data needs to flow back and forth, and you can do, you know, a swivel chair, or type it in, you swivel your chair to the other computer and you type it in again over there. But that, again, rote process, humans suck at it. We're going to make mistakes and we're going to put bad data in. And we've all heard the horror stories of accidentally adding a zero or subtracting a zero from an invoice, you know, like those types of things. That happens, and it happens all the time. And so to streamline that process, right? I need to integrate these two systems. And so the nature of the integrations now, which is really just cross-platform business processes, they're very dynamic and they're very complex because they are a business process. And processes, they change, they evolve. As we grow and we change, our processes should be changing and growing and evolving with us. And we need to understand the process, and then we need to build out these integrations in such a way that it's quickly adaptable when the process changes again, because it will at some point. Number two, documentation. All right, so again, that whole Gartner thing about a 40 times increase in total cost of ownership, a lot of that comes from two things, right? Failed or poor implementation, and then the ongoing maintenance. Both of those things are greatly benefited from thorough documentation. So taking the time to put pen to paper and actually mapping out a business process the way you understand it to function is an exercise that is so incredibly valuable. Because when you force people to think through it in a granular detail, you start to realize how much of that is actually ambiguous or soft logic, and how much of it is, you know, even not understood between groups or departments, right? It's incredible the stuff that'll come out of the woodwork when you start going through the process of actually documenting. And once you do document, right, it's helping you make sure you cross your T's and dot your I's. And then after the fact, when questions arise, instead of trying to track down the people that have that knowledge in their head, we can point to centrally housed documentation that people can reference and help themselves. So, you know, as a consultant, a lot of what we do is helping, you know, like service centers be more efficient, reducing ticket times and stuff like that, ticket response and resolution times. And one of the number one tools that's used to help address, you know, reduce ticket volume and increase the speed at which they're able to resolve them is a repository, right? Somewhere that we are storing and making documentation available and searchable. The best case scenario is you never get a ticket in the first place, because, you know, whoever your customer is, be it internal or an external customer, they're able to find the answer to their own problems without ever having to reach out. That's the ideal state. But when they do reach out, or they have to reach out for whatever reason, we want to make it as easy as possible for the people that are helping them to find answers. And again, that's where documentation comes in really handy. You can have a new girl or new guy on the team take a look at the documentation and figure out what needs to be done, what was built, where the issue might reside, stuff like that. Next, driving adoption and expansion. This is a topic, frankly, everything today is something that I'm passionate about, but you know, adoption is a big one, because I could build you the coolest dang thing in the world, but if nobody uses it, the value is absolutely, it's zero. It's lost. There is no value, right? And so it doesn't matter how good a job you do at understanding the process and documenting it. If you can't get people to use it, well, what was the point, right? That's a wasted cost. I spent all this time and money and energy on stuff that provides no value. And so study up on change management. Figure out, right, some of the, like, those change management principles are so important. If you don't have, you know, or right, if you or there isn't somebody on your team that's going to own that and study up on it, pull in somebody who is already well versed in change management to help you, because it'll make all the difference in adopting what's been built. And lastly, the importance of governance and good architecture. All right, Gartner calls out that 40x increase in total cost of ownership. A lot of what goes into that is understanding that there's going to be failed implementations or poor implementations, and there's going to be poor architectural decisions that result in very difficult maintenance needs. They can just bake that into their assumptions because it's so prevalent, right? And it's one of the unintended consequences of making automation so widely available, right? oh, great. I don't need a developer who's been trained in all these different principles to go build this automation. I can have the analyst pick it up and go because we've got this really cool graphical user interface that makes it so easy for them to build an automation, right? And as valuable as that is, right, it means that you can build crap faster too, right? Like I can build good things faster, but it also means I can build garbage faster. And so when I don't use a good architecture, if I haven't like roped in somebody who knows what they're doing to help set up, you know, a good foundation, you can paint yourself into a corner, and that, you know, that stuff needs to be heavily modified or scrapped and rebuilt. And so those are the types of things that Gartner's calling out as to why there's a 40 times increase in the total cost of ownership for all these different, you know, technologies. So hopefully that makes sense. I want to talk just at one more slide here on architecture and the center of excellence. I am out of time, but you can think about architecture, right? Building to scale and building something from the ground up is very different than maintenance. And so, you know, you think about designing and building a car versus maintaining it, two very different things, right? It is not that crazy to think about changing oil, rotating tires, right? Like those are routine things that are easy to do. Designing and building a car that's got good handling and good stopping and is safe, right? That's a whole different can of worms. And so you need to keep that into account, take that into account. And opinion here, right? Leveraging somebody who knows how to build and design is highly valuable because they're expensive and you probably don't need them once it's built. And so that's where consultants and, you know, like that's where consultants come into play. Design this car, build it, and then train my people on how to maintain it. And then give us, right, like an escalated support, right? I want to be able to reach out when my people run into issues. That, in my opinion, is the ideal. A good solid architecture that your people can build on. Don't try and recreate the wheel and build your own architecture from scratch, right? And then governance, right? Ongoing maintenance and modification, making sure that you're continuing to build on it, right? That's like a vehicle maintenance and upgrade schedule, right? And you may know exactly what you want, but it's also a great place to have somebody come in, right? Because I can come in and, you know, coming back to cars, I can say, well, you know, the way we built this car, there's a couple of things that we need to, you know, budget, timeline, whatever restricts us. And now as we're going forward, right, the main things you're going to want to prove are braking and handling. So suspension, tires, brakes, right? Those are kind of the planned upgrades. Can't do it all at once. And so, you know, as we're going through over the course of the next year or two, we're going to do suspension here, and then tires here, and then brakes that, right? Whatever it is. It's the same thing with your system, right? You're not, if you don't draw a line in the sand and get something built and up and running, you're never gonna go live. You've got to draw the line in the sand. You've got to create what is that like phase one look like? Build it, go live, and then you iterate and you continually make it better and better. And that's where governance comes in. That's a whole nother topic I could speak on an hour in and of itself. But these are the things that are going to make all the difference in your implementation projects and driving your total cost of ownership down on your spend with IT, right? Like those are the things that are going to make all the difference. Choosing the right tools and then implementing those tools well, and then making sure that you have an ongoing governance plan in place. That, in a nutshell, right, that's how you're going to drive the total cost of ownership in your organization down.